I've made a lot of characters and I've been teaching students how to make characters just like this. And one of the most common sculpting mistakes I see is not being able to sculpt characters accurately from references. You guys submitted your sculpts for me to review, and we are going to be looking at this sculpt from Alex. And just before we dive in, I'll give you a moment to spot what you think might be wrong on this sculpt. So the first things that stand out on this character when I look at it, if you take a look at the surface of the sculpt, you're going to notice that there are so many unnecessary details that take our attention away from what we should actually looking at, which is the face, and it just takes our attention to this part of the sculpt. So we're going to try and fix some of this up. I'm going to select the model and I'm going to go into sculpt mode. Now that we're in sculpt mode, I'm actually going to show you the wireframes of this sculpt. This was the way Alex sent it to me. And with this very high resolution mesh, it's going to be really difficult to actually smooth out these details. So I'm actually going to take the remesh resolution down. A remesh resolution of 0.01 works for this sculpt. So I'm just going to remesh this. And now we have much lower resolution that we can work with. To fix up some of these surface irregularities, we can just use the clear shades brush, and then we can add in some volume right here on the sculpt, and then we can smooth that out. Okay, let's do the same on the forehead here. I'm going to add in some volume, and then I'm going to smooth this out. Also at the back here, we're going to need some more volume. I'm going to add in here just so that we don't have any surface irregularity. So just add in volumes and then smooth it out. I'll go all the way to the cheeks right here, and I'm just going to smooth all of this out. Also right here on the neck, there's a lot of anatomical detail that is showing through the model that I don't think is necessary. If you take a look at references from the films, you'll notice that there's not as much anatomical detail. So we can also just come in here, and then we can also just smooth this out and just make everything flow nicely into each other. So I'll just go over and smooth everything like this. All right, so now let's take a look at the before and after. Before and after. So now we have been able to fix that. Let's focus in a little bit more on the face. If you notice right here, there's this hard edge on the nose. If you take a look at the reference, those edges are not as hard or are not as sharp. So I'm just going to go into sculpt mode. I'm going to use the clear shades brush. So I'll add in some volume there, just like so. And I'm going to smooth this out. And I'm going to use the crease polish brush, and I'll just mark a little bit of indication going to the corner of the eyes like this. So I'm just going to smooth that out. Okay, and I think that looks nice. That looks much more like the reference. Another thing that you notice on the reference are the cheekbones. If I also just zoom out and I show you some of the other references, you'll notice that for most of these characters, they have really defined cheekbones, and that's something that's missing on this character. So let's just go ahead and add in some nice cheekbones. And the way we are going to do that, we are just going to use the grab brush. We can pull out the cheekbones like so. Also take a look at it from the side view. Okay, something like that. And let's also fix it up from this view. We are going to pull the cheeks forward, and then we are going to take this part of the cheeks back into the face. And I'm just going to smooth this out so that we have something that looks like this. And already you can see how much nicer that looks. Okay, now that we're working on the cheeks, we can go down to the chin. We can also just straighten it up like we have on the reference. I'm going to use the grab brush and I'll just pull out the chin, something like this. Now something else that we need to fix up is the separation between the jaw and the cranium. Doesn't exist on this character at this point, so let's go ahead and add that in. I'm going to use the crease polish brush. I'm just going to mark out the separation between the jaw and the cranium. So right here, I'll just go over it a couple of times, and I'll just go over it at the bottom right here. Okay, so something like that. We need to smooth this out. I'm going to smooth this out, hold down shift and smooth it out. I'm going to use the grab brush, and I'm just going to pull out the jaw so that we have some definition to the jaw, something like this. Okay, maybe don't play it out that much. We're just going to pull it back a little bit, and I'm going to smooth this out. Also right here, you notice how high up the jaw is compared to the chin. So we can just move that up. I'm going to bring this up into the face like so. And let's smooth out this part right here. I'm just going to smooth that out. If you take a look at the side view, you'll also notice right here that the chin is doing something like this. We actually want that to be flat. So I'm just going to use the grab brush. I'll just pull this down to match with the jaw and with the cranium. So something like this. We can pull this jaw forward like so. And we can also use the crease polish brush and just mark out the jaw like this. And I'm also going to just smooth it out. So something like this looks good. Let's take a look at the before and let's take a look at the after. So just with those little changes that we have made, you can see something is starting to happen on the sculpt. We are going to make it look even much better. The next place I want us to focus on is on the nose right here. So the nose shoes right here are a bit too high up. So we can just go into sculpt mode. Let's use the grab brush and we're just going to level this part of the nose shoes with the bottom of the nose. So I'm just going to bring this down around here. I'll hold down shift to smooth this out. And then I'm going to dig in the nose shoes with the drop brush, something like this. And then we can use the crease polish brush to mark out the side of the nose. And I'm also going to smooth this out. Let's also make sure that there are no indents between the transitions on the mouth and the nose. I'm just going to smooth this out like so. Okay, that looks good. And we can just mark out the side of the nose a little bit more. I'll use the grab brush and I'll just pull this back a little bit. From the front view too, let's also adjust this, something like this. And the nose actually have this sort of shape to them. So I'm just going to use the crease polish brush and I'm just going to mark out that shape, something like that. All right. And I think this is looking good. We can also bring the jaw, we can also bring the nose in a bit more. And now let's take a look at the side profile. Let's also take a look at some references of the side profile. So if you notice the side profile from here, it just transitions nicely into the nose and there's this kind of pump on the nose. So let's also do that. I'm going to use the grab brush. I'm going to pull this out and then I'll make this transition much nicer. I'll use the clay shoes brush to just add in some volume right there. And then I'm going to smooth this out. Okay. And now we just have very nice transition between the forehead. You can also just add some more volume right here, just to make it a bit rounded. So we have some nice transition from the forehead to the nose. And now right here on the mouth, let's take a look at the reference. You notice on the reference, we have this type of slanted steps. So let's also do that on the sculpt. I'm going to take the chin back. And right now the mouth is non-existent on this sculpt. So I'm just going to use the clay trace brush. I'll go over this and I'll show you how I sculpt mouth in a bit. But I'm just going to smooth this out and I'm going to take this back and I'll just make sure that I have this slanted in the right way so that when we come in to add the mouth, we already have a good foundation to work on. So I'm just going to smooth this out and then let's also mark out the chin. I'm going to use the crease polish brush and I'll just mark this out like so and I'll bring this up. All right, so something like this is already working. Let's take a look at this reference right here. I just want to make this area of the mouth much flatter. So I'm just going to use the grab brush. I'm going to pull this cheek, this area right here in. And we can also bring down the chin a little bit more. And then let's clean up the shapes of the jaw. So that already looks much nicer. Let's compare the before and after. Before and after. And we have not really made any huge changes. All right, let's take a look at the distance between the eyes. So if you take a look at the reference, this reference right here, this is one eye. And the distance between these two eyes, we can have another eye here. And we can also have half of an eye here. So what I'm trying to say, there's a lot of space between the eye. So I'm just going to use the grab brush. I'll just pull this far apart from each other. We want the eyes to be more on the side of the face. So I'll just push this far from each other, something like that. And we start to get that look of the avatar really nicely. I'll just use the crease polish brush and then we can mark out the eyebrow line just a little bit to indicate where the eyebrows would be. I'm going to go over that with the script brush, and I'm not going to smooth over that. All right, I think that looks nice. I also make sure to just adjust this from the side view too, and just make sure it looks nice from every angle that we are going to be viewing it from. If you also take a look from the side profile, you can notice that there's this indent here. So let's just use the clean sheet brush and add in some volume right there, and then we can smooth over this so that we don't have that indent anymore. Okay, from the side view, that looks good now, and also from the front view, that looks really nice. Now let's come back in, and I'm going to show you how I would approach sculpting the mouth on this character. Let's take a look at the reference. So on the reference, you can see from the corners of the eye, you draw a straight line down. That's about where the corner of the mouth is. So I'm just going to use the crease polish brush, and I'm going to just mark out the corner of the mouth right here. And I'll just zoom out a bit, and I think, yeah, those corners would work. We can use the grab brush, and I'm just going to pull this down just to make some space for the upper lip. I'm just going to bring this down, something like this. And to sculpt the mouth, we can use the crease polish brush, and I'm just going to draw a straight line from the middle of the face into the corner of the mouth, something like this. And once we have this, one thing I like to do is to make sure that the mouth actually wraps around the teeth. So you just want to use the grab brush, and you just pull in the corners of the mouth like this. And you just want to make sure that the mouth wraps around the teeth. So from this angle, it should look like a barrel, something like this. Okay, and I think that's going to work just fine. And now we can also sculpt in the lips. To sculpt in the lips, we can use the clay sheet brush, and we're just going to make indications of the upper lip. So I'm just going to go over this upper lip like so. And we also want to make sure that it transitions nicely into the face. So I'm just going to smooth this out. Okay, and this is the top lip. We just need to refine the shape. I'm going to use the crease polish brush, and I'm going to go over the top lip like so. And now let's also bring this in. All right, so that is the shape of the top lip done. I'm just going to smooth over this so that we have much nicer shapes. Okay, and now let's do the exact same thing for the lower lips. I'm going to use the clay sheet brush, and we can just draw out the volumes of the lower lips. Okay, and then I'm going to smooth this out. All right, now let's just use the grab brush and pull this into a much better shape that we like. And I'm going to smooth out the corners of the mouth. I'm going to also just drag down the corners of the mouth just so that we have a nicer shape to the mouth. And now let's refine the shapes on the mouth. Let's use the crease brush, and we just go in and define some of these shapes a bit more. You can also use the inflate brush to make sure that the lips are round. So I'm just going over this with the inflate brush just to make the lips much more rounded like so. And now we have the lips in place. Okay, let's take a look at the before and the after. I think this looks very nice. All right, we can do some final adjustments just to make this look more like a female. We can smooth this out, and then we can also just sharpen the cheeks, the cheekbones a little bit more. I'm just using the clay sheet brush, and I'm going over these areas like so. Let's also make sure that the lips, the bottom lips is behind the upper lips. So I'm just going to pull the upper lips forward, something like that. And let's also take a look at this from the side profile, and we can compare it with what we have here. Okay, I think I like how that looks. So you will notice right here that the nose transitions really nicely into the mouth. So let's also do that. I'm going to use the grab brush. I'm going to bring this down, and I'll just make sure that the nose transitions really nicely into the face. And also you notice that the nostrils are a lot less like humans. So let's try and get that in. I'm going to use the draw brush, and I'm just going to mark out these nostrils like this. Okay, and then we can use the crease polish brush and mark out the sides of the nose. Okay, and now that we have this in place, we can add in color. I'm just going to look at the before and the after again. So I think this looks very nice. So let's add in some colors to the eyes. So right here we have black pupils. So I'm just going to select these faces and these faces. Let's go into the vertex paint mode. We can turn on face selects, and we will just be able to paint in those areas where we selected in edit mode. I'm going to bring this out a little bit more. I'll select these loops. I'll go around here, and I'm just going to slide this GG to slide them up a little bit. Okay. And now let's also color in these other areas right here. Also going to select the same right here. And now let's go to vertex paint and let's choose a nice color for the eyes, and we can paint this in. Okay, I think we need to make the pupils much larger. Let's just go select this. Also make sure to select this and GG to slide them. I'm going to shade this smooth, and I'm just going to rotate this a little bit. We can add in some colors to the sculpt. I'm going to go into sculpt mode, and I'm going to find a nice blue color for this character. Probably that's too dark. Just go higher. Oh, okay, and I'll just paint in everything. Okay, and we can add in the details on the skin. I'm just going to use a slightly darker color. I'll turn on pressure sensitivity and I'll turn down the strength. Just adding those colors right here. One last thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to make these eyes a little bit larger on the character. And now that I've made all these changes, we can actually increase the remesh resolution back to a higher level. So somewhere around here, and I'm going to remesh this. And I'm just going to go ahead and clean up the sculpt and add in some more colors. And then I'm going to show you the final result. And now, after a few minutes of sculpting, this is the before and this is after. So these are just a few things to look out when you're sculpting your own characters. If you would like me to critique your own sculpts, you can send them to the link in the description. So I'll catch you guys in the next video.